in a young mind, I guess I was under the delusion that I was going to party my way into the life of my dreams somehow.
Dawn Deguire was a violent alcoholic by the time she was 16 years old.
I had a friend in recovery who described it really well, where the front of my shirt said, "Screw you," and the back of my shirt said, "Love me."
She didn't understand why she got so angry when she was drinking until she started to understand her family lineage.
This pattern, this thing I'm healing right now this isn't even mine. This is like my father's, this is my grandmother's. Who's going to interrupt the pattern?
After many very painful years of addiction, Dawn turned to the 12 steps, and through that door, she found her spirituality and realized the flow of the universe.
I was not in resistance to the world and to the kind of flow of the universe. I was in tandem with it, the same way the geese are going, the same way the river's going. How do I not swim against that current? And it's one thing to be told that and to have heard that from a lot of different teachings and elders over the years. And it's another thing to embody that and to understand that.
In this episode, Dawn talked to me about what brought her into addiction and what brought her into recovery, how the 12 steps changed the game for her, intergenerational trauma, Indigenous teachings and cultural practices that helped her, and what her understanding of God is today. But before we get into it, what's up? My name's Dan, podcaster, keynote speaker, and advocate, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. I want to hear your thoughts. If at any time you hear something that resonates with you, or something you don't like, or something you'd like to learn, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking. I want to know. I'm here to foster productive conversations about substance use, and I can't do it alone. So with that, let's get into my conversation with Dawn Deguire.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
Hey Dawn, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Is there anything that you'd like to say before we really jump into it?
I just want to acknowledge this show and this platform that you've created here. I think it's a great idea. I think it's great for people who are coming into recovery from any doorway they're coming in through. And it's facilitating the process for people to come into a more healed and better version of themselves. So yeah, that's it. I'm glad to be here for that.
Why don't you start from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you into addiction?
To put it very plainly and simply, I was a raging, suicidal, and violent teenage alcoholic. And things got pretty bad. I was one of those kind of out of control teens, and you couldn't talk to me, you couldn't reach me. And I had a friend in recovery who described it really well, where the front of my shirt said, "Screw you," and the back of my shirt said, "Love me." And so it was just a whole lot of trying to get a lot of needs met, but in all of the wrong ways. And it was the result of a lot of pain, a lot of childhood, a lot of pain and emptiness that was there, that was left untended to, so.
Was it something that you grew up with? Was there alcohol in the home?
When I was very young, I was fortunate. By the time I was the youngest of five, but by the time I was around 5 years old, both my parents became sober themselves. And they just kind of, put one foot in front of the other, did the working thing, did the family raising kids thing. And so a lot of the parental stuff was kind of not such an issue from the time I was around 5 up. Yeah.
So was it something that you couldn't wait to get your hands on? For me, it was very much like, I can't wait to find it.
Totally. And I remember that as a kid, as like I was watching Motley Crue videos and Metallica videos. I had these older brothers.
That rock and roll music is what did it.
They had the leather jackets with like studs on
Big
them.
hair.
Yeah, I remember them making their own, hammering their own studs into their own leather jackets and things. And in the basements of little, swirls of smoke coming up out of different things and stuff. And these people in the videos, and like they just look so alive. And I remember being, 8, 9, 10 years old and just idolizing these rock stars and watching these videos, totally no supervision, but which I think is common back then in the 80s. But And I was like, I can't wait till my life begins
Mm.
and get my hands on some of that. And that's how it started. I couldn't wait, and then I found that right moment, that opportunity in time, and it kind of transported me into this whole other
Mm.
life that in a young mind, I guess I was under the delusion that I was gonna, party my way into the life of my dreams somehow.
Oh yeah, you thought
And
that was the pathway to success.
that's what I thought was gonna happen. It was gonna be magic too. It was just gonna kind of land in my lap. So I was just looking at a young person who just didn't have a whole lot of guidance.
Do you think guidance would have helped?
I don't know. I think maybe if I'd had maybe a little bit more role modeling, yeah, potentially, if I would have had somebody to trust or some people to trust that I could talk to that could help me make sense of the world.
Mm.
And today I have a passion for that, of talking to young people and helping them make sense of the world, because it was just kind of a free for all. I was just trying to figure out, like, why am I on this planet? What am I doing? I'm talking 9, 10, 11 years old, where you start to have these existential questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to ask myself, like, what's the point of this life? Like, am I here just to feel pain and, make money and do what my parents are doing? And I remember comparing myself to other people, other kids. Like, I had a friend who, she had this kind of great prototypical Christian upbringing, and it just seemed like she had something I didn't have.
Mm.
Like, fundamentally, there was something missing in me. And that wound, or that belief, that core belief that was inside of me, of like, there's something different or missing in me, the fundamentally lacking, it drove every decision I ever made for the rest of my life.
So you tell us about your first drunk. Was it something that, like, was it a good experience? 'Cause mine wasn't a good experience. I blacked right out. Like, there was no caution involved. I woke up, I had pissed myself. It was a mess. So, but I went to school and bragged about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rite of passage. Is that how you felt about it?
The first drunk, I remember I was 12 years old. We'd met some older guys, and they had this moonshine that they had made.
No.
And I remember being in the basement of this house, and there's this red room, like red light, and this guy playing the drums down there, and I was like, "That's Tommy Lee! Like, he looks like Tommy Lee."
I
finally, yeah. And then somebody pushed us in the closet, and we kissed, and it was just like, I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And then I remember puking and then being sick the next day and seeing the guy the next day, and it was like, that is not Tommy Lee. It does not look like Tommy Lee. Anyway, never really did talk to him again, but I was off to the races after that. It was like a light came alive in me, that fundamental piece that felt like it was empty and void. It was like something sparked in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about alcoholism, or I think about drugs or whatever, and they call it being lit up. And it's like it lit something in me, and I was chasing that light.
What did your family have to say about it when they started to notice? Surely they started to notice pretty quick, right?
Yeah. By the time I was, I don't know, 15, 16, I was drinking every day. And I don't know how I did that. I don't know how I managed, but it was like friends would be stealing, their parents' liquor cabinets. And I hung around with the kind of kids that, like, we were like this collective, and the boys would go out and like rob houses and pawn all the stuff so that we could like feed the addictions of the collective, like. And that's how we managed to party all the time. And I was in bars and things, like, as a teenager, just a kid, and every day. And I think honestly, it just progressed so much. My mom, when she caught on to it, she started like, "You're going to an addictions counselor." I remember being at an addictions counselor, and I probably couldn't have been more than 15, maybe 16. And this addictions counselor tried to give me the tough love approach. So she's calling me out on all my behavior. She's calling me out. She's like, "You're doing this and you're that, and you're an alcoholic and you should know that," and da da da. And I remember like the t-shirt of like, "Screw you, love me," on the back, like this invisible wall, this invisible shield just went up around me. and I couldn't hear her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a survival mechanism, right? And so I know what I really needed was somebody to listen and to understand. Although I genuinely believe that I'd found my solution to life.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the magic elixir, right?
So, did you end up on your own? Did you end up like parents kick you out? What did that look like?
No, actually, it was one of those like I crawl into the basement window and I lay down. I was a pretty hard binge drinker, actually. And so I don't know, I drank in a lot of these different ways. Over periods of time, I drank every day for a number of years. And then I started kind of evolving my drinking into these different kind of ways to adapt so that I could meet the world and its demands in a way. And so what I would do is I just finally started going out on weekends and trying to just do just weekends. I was trying to like control and enjoy my drinking. And that's what they talk about in some of the literature, right? And under this delusion that I'm going to control and enjoy it one day, and I'd swear off drinking because it was always so bad and something would happen or somebody would be hurt or somehow I was beat up or like it was like not good. And sometimes nothing even happened, but I was just felt with such a sense of shame and depression and darkness that it was just like, I got to quit doing this. I got to quit doing this.
So how long was it then from the time you started to the time you started, from the time you started drinking to the time you started feeling like I can't keep doing this?
Oh gosh. By the time, okay, so the first time I tried to quit drinking, I think I was around 17 and I was white knuckling it. And so it's kind of funny when you think about like, my friends had an intervention on me. They had a couple of interventions.
Your drinking
on me.
friends
Yeah,
had an
drinking friends had one of them was like a drug dealer.
Wow.
We were the kids who were like in and out of Calder and these are the people who were intervening on me. So
Okay.
it must have been pretty bad, right? And so I remember they tricked me and they drove me to my first AA meeting when I was 17. And I went in there and there was these old guys and they were, and up went that invisible shield.
Yeah.
In that wall. I heard nothing. And I was just absolutely tormented or traumatized the whole time I was there. And I was so bitter. And it wasn't until many years later that I opened my mind to like a different approach. But regardless, it was still like, the first time I tried to quit, I was around 16, 17 years old. I knew I couldn't go on this way. And I knew I was an alcoholic from the time I was 13, 14 years old. So, they talk about, we admitted we're alcoholic. Yeah, long since admitted it. But life being unmanageable, no. I still got this.
Yeah. You mentioned being traumatized by what you heard in an AA meeting. Was what was being said that really traumatized you? You mentioned the wall went up, but like,
yeah, I don't think it was I think it was more of that like tough talk, you've got to change. It's not necessarily that somebody said to me, you've got to change. It was just the real approach that people were taking. And I was really tender and just trying to be okay, I think, in my skin every day. And so, feeling like somebody was seeing through my wall or my act or my performance, and that kind of tough love approach just wasn't what I needed at that time. And I felt that energy in the room, and I heard those voices, and there was older people and all of that stuff. So I think it was, and I was mortified because I was so embarrassed because I was tricked to go into this thing, right? So it obviously has to be something you've got to be willing to do yourself. It can't be something that somebody forces you into and tries to make you do, right?
Yeah, and that's such an overarching theme to pretty much all the conversations that I've had. It's like there has to be a willingness.
Yeah.
And you just touched on a very valuable point. Despite the people in the room wanting to help, trying to help you in the way they saw fit, further traumatized you?
I don't know if it was that it further traumatized me. It's hard to say. I think I just wasn't ready for the approach that they maybe were taking. And I'm sure not everybody in the room was sitting there like in a circle around me, ganging up and saying like, you know, I'm sure it was just my perception of
Yeah.
how I was feeling the energy in the room and what was being said, and the fact that I'd been tricked into coming here. And like the whole thing was just this whole like shutdown of, you know, so I wouldn't say that anybody was actually traumatizing me. I think they were just talking hard truth, and I was not in a place of truth.
So what did you say to your friends after the meeting?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I know I was pissed off at them. Like,
Yeah.
I know that. But
Yeah.
then I was met with the like, well, we just want what's best for you. And, you know, da 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 da. But it was just one of those like, go home, crawl into bed, cover my head with the sheet, and like, you know, just kind of, you know, be angry, frustrated, hurt, despairing of over this problem I've got.
Yeah.
And it's like, how come everybody else can be really hard drinkers and all of that, and they're not crazy like me? They're not violent, they're not, you know, falling down and, you know, whatever. Even the ones who were, it's like it seemed like they didn't seem to have the same kind of consequences as I did, you know. So
You think you were born different?
um
Like predisposed?
genetically predisposed, yeah. I remember my dad telling me that, especially when I was younger. He's like, you know, we've got this genetic predisposition, he said, you know, and being First Nations, and how he had, you know, struggled with his own addictions, my mother as well, and it's a family lineage kind of thing. He had told me that. By then it was like, yeah, well, you know, what do you want me to do? It's like, now I'm supposed to clean this up? Like, it's just what it is, right?
Speaking of, First Nations lineage, was there any evidence of intergenerational trauma in your home growing up?
Yeah, my grandmother is a residential school survivor.
You think
And
that trickled down?
oh yeah, absolutely. You know, in my healing journey, I've become more and more attuned to the subtleties of what's going on inside of me. And some of it's like bordering onto some kind of mystical stuff, it feels like even. But there's been times where I've realized like this pattern, this thing I'm healing right now this isn't even mine. This is like my father's, this is my grandmother's, this is my, you know, and so coming into awareness of generational healing, that's actually been a gift that I've been able to, you know, somewhat help other people with through different healing ceremonies and things that we've done. Um, and come into awareness of like, you know, I don't have to be fully responsible for this entire thing. This is not all my fault. There's a bigger, larger social context that is feeding this whole thing.
When you mentioned you come to the realization that this isn't mine, this is my dad's, this is my grandma's, does that deter you from trying to heal it?
No, because I mean, it'll piss me off first,
Yeah.
honestly, you know, or it's just like, fuck, another thing, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
when does this end? Right. But at the same time, it's like, if not me, then
Then
who and when am I, like, I'm living out the suffering of this. So it's basically, you know, I gotta take the healing on, if I want to have a better, you know, quality of life emotionally and spiritually, physically. So usually after having, you know, a period of feeling kind of victimized by all of the weight of the past that gets dumped down, you know, I'll get on board and I'll do what I need to do. So for instance, you know, I think a lot of the anger I carried, uh, you know, it was a mystery to me. Why was I violent when I drank? You know, that kind of stuff. Like what it was I would be like, I'm such a nice person otherwise. Like and I am. I'm like this harmony and loving and relationships and unity. Like that's the kind of stuff my constitution, you know, stands for. And then I'd swing all the way over to this other end, and it's like, is this anger even mine? You know? And so there's been lots of these little things. And so more recently, Just looking at patterns in relationships with spouse and that kind of stuff. Like a lot of times that comes out in those relationships. And, um, uh, my grandmother, she was separated from her parents, right? So I think she was married 3 times she's trying to find her solution in the next marriage and the next relationship and that kind of thing, right? So like people carry these kind of lineage and these patterns and things like that down the line. And like, so it's like, who's going to interrupt the pattern?
What was it then that brought you into recovery? Was it like one pinnacle moment? Did something really bad happen, or was it more of a thought process?
It was more of a thought process, actually. Yeah. I sat down one day and I just thought, like, what is this life about? It was that same existential question. Like, what am I here for? And I was 29 years old and I had this vision. I was like 90 years old and I was looking back over my life. Basically, the message, like, I've had enough pain in the first 30 years to stretch out over the full 90. I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe there's 60 years left. 60 years of the same shit as the first 30 years? Like, hell no, I can't do it. But then I also had this thought, and it was just this moment of hopefulness when I thought about, okay, well, 60 years, that's a long time to turn a life around. That's a lot of time. And I realized in that moment, if I look back on my life and I just regret all the things I didn't do with my life, and that I just stayed in this kind of place of mediocrity and hiding under the surface and full of shame and guilt. And I just thought, like, I could probably actually make a decision. Now, I wasn't quite ready. I white knuckled it. I gave it the equivalent of like hanging on a chin up bar, and I went and I got motivated. So I went to the gym. I tried to, become the best in shape. I was reading self-help. I was, doing all these different things. And I started to feel quite a bit better, about showing up in the world, just like not in this toxic haze of shame and depression. It wasn't that long before I was actually pretty miserable, and I was judging everybody else around me.
I was going to ask you that. So were you just like not drinking, but still hanging out with the
Yeah.
same crowd, still going to the bar,
All
still
the same stuff.
I love to dance and
Yeah.
stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally. Vicariously soaking in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But I was resentful. I was bitter at all the people who didn't have to change, and I did, right? There was something under the surface there. Although I knew that this kind of transition into a healthier life was better for me because I was experiencing some good things and stuff. It wasn't that long before the happiness started to dial down, and it was more and more of like kind of this egoic, like I'm rising above people and I'm looking down my nose at them because they're still, doing this and doing that, and this kind of self-righteousness. And some people would feel it off of me, right? And so it was actually just making me more disconnected from people that I actually wanted. What I really wanted was connection, and I didn't know that, right? It wasn't until I was 31 that I, took the different approach. I went into recovery, and that was after some relapses, right? And one of them being my own wedding, and I took off to Jamaica and got married. And next thing I know, I'm in a first class flight with a champagne flute in my hand.
Oh no.
And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, should I drink this? Should I not drink this? Should I drink this? Should I not? And I did. I ended up drinking it, and we spent our time there and had the wedding. I let my bridesmaids know how much they disappointed me in the wedding planning process, and it wasn't absolute tragedy or anything like that, but it wasn't the greatest way to start a wedding or to start a marriage, was to have a relapse and to kind of go dive back down into my shame and all of that. So on the plane ride home from there actually is when, kind of shaking on the freezing cold plane, like rocking back and forth. It was just like, yeah, I'm done.
Let's take a quick break. I am going to read off today's sponsors, and then we'll get back at it. This episode is funded in part by the SK-NEIHR, Nadawehoan, and Mama Waikikiak Research, Training, and Mentorship Networks. which facilitates First Nations and Métis and First Nations health and well-being research, training, and knowledge mobilization throughout Saskatchewan. The SK-NEIHR is grounded in community and led by Métis, First Nations, and allied researchers in partnership with Saskatchewan's 3 universities and many community partners. SK-NEIHR is funded primarily by the Canadian Institute of Health Research. EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider of mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering from substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has announced its path for the pursuit of self-government. As an MNS citizen, I am proud to see my government fight to protect my rights. This is our moment. To learn more about the treaty and our path to self-government, go to ourmoment.ca. Pine Lodge, the treatment center I went to 7 years ago when I got sober, offers inpatient addictions treatment and aftercare programming in Regina, Saskatchewan. To inquire about services or make a donation, call 306-510-1891. Wellness News, Choice for Healthy Living, is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness-related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals, locally allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below. Now, am I correct in assuming that your flight back from your wedding, that was your turning point?
Yeah, that was where I made a decision. I'm gonna go back into this program here, and I'm gonna open my mind up a little bit,
Okay.
and that's what I did. But to rewind a little bit, what had happened, somewhere in my late 20s, somebody I know since childhood, one of my kind of troublesome friends, we both openly talked to each other about our addiction. We knew, and she came into this party one night, and I was kind of hanging off of her. Happy to see you. I love you, whatever. And she had this light just radiating out of her. She had this, she had that light, that thing, but it was like beyond anything I'd ever felt or experienced off of somebody. And I was always very sensitive to feeling people's energy and things like that, right? And she had something I'd never felt come off of a person before. And this radiance. And I asked her, like, so what are you doing? Like, what have you been up to? And she said she'd gone into addiction recovery. And seed planted right there. And I knew I wasn't ready. And I said it to her. I said, yeah, I'm going to do that one day, one of these days I'll quit, So I kind of knew it was coming for a long time, that it was just the slow wearing down emotionally and mentally, spiritually, that the drinking had on me, and there was no light, there was no fun anymore. It was those days were long over.
The
it
party
was
was
kind of
over.
repeat, Groundhog Day. And then I'd also met somebody else, a friend in the Indigenous community who hadn't taken a recovery journey in terms of like a program, but had been doing the Red Road. And he had this light, right? And he had this positivity and this radiance. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. So these are people who are kind of young, and they've got something that I I want that. And so a seed had been planted a little bit of time before then. And so when I came back from Jamaica and I decided to go over to this recovery meeting, I went by myself this time. I wasn't tricked in. I wasn't,
This was the first time that you'd gone back to the rooms since you were tricked into it?
The friend had taken me 1-to-1 meeting.
Okay.
After that, she took me to one meeting, but I wasn't ready because I went in and I heard the mess. I didn't hear the message. And number two, I was still in that place, and it talks about it in some of the literature about it's all very good information, but there's, I wasn't convinced I couldn't still do something about this myself. And so then started that journey of self-improvement and
right.
I'm going to the gym and now I'm self-righteously above everybody. And then I go and sit in this recovery room from that perspective of, here I am.
Oh, so
I've
you're
got
better than
this.
these people too.
Yes, right?
Okay.
Right. And I think that's the ego of the addict, right? We're either above people, overcompensating, or we're below everybody. We're never just at that humility line. We're that place of just like, I can just be with other people. I can just be. I don't have to prove myself. I don't have to perform. Like, to me, that's the gift. And that's where my recovery and my serenity is having a way of life that helps cultivate that place.
Yeah. Interesting to me, you mentioned that one of your realization, one of your aha moments was when somebody who was in recovery came to a party you were at.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it interesting how when you got sober, you went into this party and we're both like, oh, you shouldn't do that, but it was somebody that was in recovery going to a party where there was probably a mess. Like, what was she doing there?
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. And it's interesting, like, what was she doing there? But obviously I think higher power took her there to plant a seed, maybe for me.
Yeah.
But regardless, like, I don't know, they talk about the state of being recovered, right? And a lot of people are like, no, I'm recovering. But when you go through the spiritual transformation and the obsession to drink alcohol is lifted and removed, it says in the literature, you can go anywhere any free man goes. You can go to a party, you can go to a wedding, you can go to whatever, and bring more life to that thing than you ever did when you were drinking, right? And you're free from the alcohol. You're not tempted. You're not tempted by it.
So what did you hear in that first meeting where you went back and you had been, I don't know if beaten into submission was the right, or maybe it is.
Yeah.
But what did you hear? Like what kept you coming back in those early days?
First thing, I walked in and there was these kind of old guys, and they tuned right into me, and they asked me questions. They took interest in me, and we just had this kind of conversation that was lighthearted and a little bit of bantering. And I even surprised myself that I was showing up like so open and not defensively. It wasn't like me. It was really weird. But then when I started listening to the stories, and I was in this like tiny little just frame of mind that was just a little bit more open than I had been the first time, because the first time I was there with the agenda to fix myself. This time I was just kind of like, I don't really know, and I'm kind of open here, so I'm just gonna. And so I just heard person after person talk about how much better their life was. And then the thing that kept me coming back was like, my God, these people are laughing. Like, they're laughing. And it was like, when was the last time I laughed? And like genuinely laughed to where I wasn't like at the expense of somebody else. And felt like a joy rumbling up inside of me. And it was like, I don't think I've ever really felt that. And so it was like subtle things like that, where people were speaking so honestly, and they were speaking so honestly about stuff that I would never say. I was so like showboat and like, the curtain, window dressing, here's my performance of being good enough in the world, that it would mortify me to admit some of the things that these people were saying, but they were lighthearted and jovial about it. And it was like, holy crap, there's, so it kept me coming back a little bit, but really it was about feeling like I relate. And so there was something in there that intrigued me before I left that meeting to continue to come back. And then later on, a couple of meetings later, a woman, she used to gather up the recovery literature from different bookstores and things, old versions of it. And she popped open her trunk. I call her a hope dealer because she handed me this literature out of her trunk, and I started to read this stuff. And then it was like, holy crap, okay, well, I'm really relating to this. And it was the first place I felt like, wow, these people really get me. They get like the inner workings of me. How the hell did they know this? So that's what kept me coming back, because I didn't realize, like, I just, what I was really longing for was a lot of connection and love. And this, Gabor Mate, the opposite of addiction is connection, right?
Yeah. So did you buy into the program right away? You mentioned you started reading the literature. Did you do the steps? Did you get a sponsor? Did you do all the things?
It took me a little while of just coming and observing and listening to become convinced that, okay, maybe what these people say isn't bullshit, and maybe maybe it could happen for me too, the way that they found this sense of purpose and serenity and peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I really wanted. I just wanted to fit in my own skin at that time. I just, I wasn't after anything big. I didn't have any big agenda. It was just, I just want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, you hear the same thing over and over, like, keep coming back, get us, do all the stuff. And so finally, I remember, it was quite a while in of going to these meetings and listening. I finally decided, like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Like, what do I have to lose? Like, what else do I have to lose here? I got nothing. I'm living in a basement suite. I hate my job. I'm, miserable. I'm depressed. I'm, having trouble with personal relationships, all of
Mm-hmm.
these different things. It's like, there's maybe only better can come from this. And so I started to do some of the things they suggested doing. And, it wasn't that long before it started to happen for me too, but
Yeah. So tell us then about where did the rubber hit the road for you? Now you mentioned the symptoms that you were still feeling up until you made the decision to engage with the literature and the program itself. I know for me, the community, it brought great value into my life. Just having a place to show up and practice being a human being, that held a lot of value for me, and maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, there were certain points when I did buy in and I did start doing the steps and I got a sponsor and all the suggestions. There were certain points where rubber really hit the road for me, and like my eyes were opened and a weight was lifted. When did that happen for you? Was there defining moments?
you know that that first kind of decision to let the higher power run my life.
Step 3.
Yeah, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know what I was praying to. I went out and I sat with this woman on the hill out there by the river, and she was talking about geese flying by and the clouds going in a certain direction and the flow of the universe and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, I'll just say this prayer, I guess, right? And at that point, I'd come to this, even in my own not drinking state, I was in so much pain and fear,
Maybe even
and
more so.
even more so, and it became really, really like acute. And so I said this prayer, and within a couple of days, it was like a weight lifted. And I began to experience this whole kind of other dimension of living. And it talks about it in the literature. It's rocketed into a fourth dimension, right? And
Mm-hmm.
where I was not in resistance to the world and to the kind of flow of the universe. I was in tandem with it. And I had to go through this learning process of learning how to stay in that flow or that tandem with, that directional flow of the universe, the same way the geese are going, the same way the river is going. How do I not swim against that current?
Mm.
And so I continue to practice that, which is one of the hardest parts of the whole recovery process. So, I mean, that was the first time, and I've had many of those types of surrenders ever since,
Mm-hmm.
because life still happens and we still become, this swim against the current, and it's just the fear, right?
Yeah.
But there's just been so many pivotal moments, but it's been the steps that have done the transformation for me. And like you said, like, because you have this ability now to see things from a new perspective, and it's facilitated by that process that's laid out in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it wasn't something that I could reach or get to on my own. That's me personally. And so I'm just forever grateful for it.
Yeah.
But it asks you to, kind of look at things from an entirely different perspective. And it's humbling,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, oh, wow, I can't blame the world anymore. I can't blame, or even if
Yeah.
even the social context around me that I didn't control, is it serving me to stay victim and bitter at my circumstances and the generational lineage stuff? Is that serving my highest purpose and my joy to hang on to that anger and that resentment and, all of that? Or is it serving my highest purpose to like move into letting that stuff go and to move into acceptance? And so that's what this process has done for me, is to, continue to help me um, just release and let go,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. a lot of people who come into recovery, they want to jump to step 9 and just go around and start saying sorry to everybody. And
I did that.
no, you didn't.
Oh, I jumped the steps bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So how was your experience? And what I'm getting at here is, tell us about your experiences rebuilding relationships, but also fostering new ones in recovery with this new set of shoes on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. I wanted the quick fix. I
Yeah.
wanted the quick
I'm sorry.
solution. Yeah, totally. It was like, all I got to do is just go and say sorry to people.
Yeah.
Oh, that's easy. I can do that. I started doing that. Right off the bat, I started doing that. I didn't have a sponsor. I wasn't reaching out to anybody. I wasn't doing anything. And I wasn't even working the steps yet. And, the situations where I went and made those amends prematurely, they ended up worse. I still haven't talked to some of those people again. I made it worse because I hadn't thought it out, and I didn't know the real harm that I'd actually done these people, and I was taking responsibility for stuff that was their stuff. It wasn't even mine. Like I was very unclear, and I needed like some experience and some guidance to help support me through that process. So I did end up going back and actually doing it the legit way that they kind of, get you to do it, and with much better results, by the way. But as far as relationships go, a lot of times what I'm learning is it's not always what you do. It's not always that, you've slipped up and said the wrong thing, or that you've, slipped up and made this mistake, or whatever it is. It's about how you clean it up. And it's about being humble enough to admit that you're wrong without like the groveling and like, I'm so, awful and please forget. It's not that. It's just being honest and humble enough and responsible enough to own like, yeah, you know what? This is me. I recognize what I said or what I did hurt you. And, I want to make that right. And how can I make that right for you? And sometimes it's just enough of being able to like apologize. And sometimes you got to change a behavior. You got to live differently. Right. And I find that in certain relationships in my life, the living differently is the hardest part.
Yeah.
But I slip up and I make the same misstep over and over and over again. And it's usually because, I've got some deep rooted pattern that, I'm powerless over, and I need some help. And so, that's the other humbling part, is to admit, like, I can't fix myself. I can't just muscle myself into being a different, changed person necessarily. And that I might need some help with some of this stuff. Right. And so how do I really honestly from my heart begin to shift and change and evolve so that other people receive me in a different way?
I had a woman in the studio, Alicia Iwanchuk, and she said something very interesting. She said, if the brain could fix this problem, if the brain could figure this out, we would have already done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think if I could just sustain long-term positive change by doing all those good things I did, going to the gym and reading and, all the healthy stuff and whatever, if I could sustain long-term positive change, then I wouldn't need to be in my recovery program. It's that I can do that stuff for a while, but I lack discipline. I can't stay over there because I just don't have the muscle or the willpower, because willpower we're doing that on self-will, on willpower, and it runs out. Like it's finite, right? And so we need this higher power, is my belief anyway. Not everybody believes that, and that's okay. But, to me, I need this higher power to help me sustain that change, because otherwise I very subtly revert back. It's like different direction, right? And that's like, how the hell did I get back to this, right? And that's the subtlety of addiction for me. It's like, how the hell did I think I was doing just fine? I had career stuff going. I had all of these things going. But next thing I know, I've landed myself with a drink in my hand, and it was subtle, and I just didn't even know that happened. And it happens with drinks. It happens with other things. I might not I certainly haven't been sober from alcoholism necessarily. I haven't drank in 12 years. However, I've probably relapsed with other things that were addictive tendencies, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
I hear people say, and I was confused early on, I need a higher power to be okay. And somewhere along the way, it was revealed to me that, okay, we all have this in some way or another. I have this higher power, but it's not the higher power that will save me. It's my willingness to have a relationship with that higher power.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more that my understanding of this higher power has shifted, it's shifted away from this off-planet God that looks down on me and judges me as good, bad, not enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
overlooked. God has blessed all of them. God left me. All of that stuff. It's become more and more of this essence of like inside of myself as being actually an expression of this higher power. That this power, I'm just as much as a part of that and the whole ecosystem as anybody or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just as loved and a part of as anybody or anything else. And my willingness to tune and tap into that consciousness and knowing within myself or within any channel or avenue, it's the willingness. And that was the key word of what you said there for me,
Mm-hmm.
and the continued willingness, is like the doorway in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I close that door up and I say, screw you, you're not doing it my way. You're not giving me what I want. You're not whatever, which I still do. I
Yeah.
still go through this tantruming of,
I do too, 100%. I do. My wife Donna was at a festival last weekend, the Held by Sisters festival, and she had different readings. She spoke with different people, and everything came back. It was funny. She said like every person that I talked to that either did like an oracle reading or an astrology or whatever, it all came back to the same thing: is that big things are going to happen, and the more we fight it, the longer it's going to take.
Mhm.
And that goes back to my belief in that we have a relationship with this thing that's bigger than us. Now, whatever that is, to whoever that is, whether you're atheist or not, I mean, it's hard to believe that we're not a part of something bigger. I mean, we're all stuck to the same ball of mud, rocketing around a ball of fire, and it's terrifying if you think about it.
Yeah.
But whatever that bigger thing is that we're a part of, it will offer us opportunities. And those can be good opportunities or those can be bad opportunities. There's bad opportunities in the liquor store. This bigger thing offers us those opportunities as well, right? It's up to us to make the choice, to do the work. Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to use this opportunity and move forward for the greater good in this opportunity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It kind of makes me think of the good orderly direction piece,
Yeah.
right? Where like it's all coming down to these little micro choices. And I think I've had a spiritual teacher that said people think that it's all about these huge, big decisions. Should I get
Mm-hmm.
married? Should I do this job? Should I,
Start a
get
business.
but it's just these tiny little micro choices every day. And if you, make the micro choice that's most aligned with you and your highest good and the highest honest, pure kind of good of the people that you love and people around you, you're kind of working in that flow of that current of the universe, right? And when I'm working on trying to serve me and trying to, get mine and trying to, whatever, it sometimes can start to feel a little hard, like I'm swimming against a current. And so, navigating that and honoring me has been one of the most confusing freaking parts about this healing journey of
Yeah.
like, how do I put myself in the equation here? What does self-love really look like? What does that express like? But it's this whole difference of just knowing when I'm going with the current in the same direction as the geese and the rivers and, that universal flow versus like now I'm swimming against the current here. And I'm so accustomed, like my nervous system is like, stuck in this switch of like, go against the current,
That's your baseline.
resist.
That's your baseline.
Yeah,
Discontent
totally.
is your baseline.
Yeah,
I say
right?
that too. Another guest said that a couple months ago. He's like, man, discontent is my baseline. It was like, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, I look back, I've been learning about, teachings, teachings, Indigenous First Nations teachings. And I think back to the teachings of the buffalo, wherein, they respect the world around them, and in that they don't stay in one place for too long. Has there, they don't graze in one place for too long. They're always moving and going to different places, because you graze too long, that place will no longer serve you. Have there been times in your recovery where things that once brought healing started to hold you back?
Yeah, definitely. You reminded me of a story, or what a teaching my elder gave me last year, because we were out picking sweetgrass
Mm-hmm.
and sage at this special place.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, when you over harvest the next year, those plants, he said, they hide. They don't come back. They're hiding. And so we had noticed from one year to the next year that, there was fewer of these sage plants and things, right? And fewer of the sweetgrass around. And so anyway, we were trying to help it, kind of come back. And so we try not to go there now too often, and to over harvest it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's the same thing as like when something stops working, and it's kind of like beating your head against the wall. Or I think about that analogy of the fly that's trying to like smash through the window over and over and trying to make the same old thing that used to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like understanding that, like, I'm an evolution. I shift, I change. And a lot of the stuff that worked for me, that was really powerful for me in terms of like, my own healing and personal development and stuff when I was younger in recovery. Things like different guided meditations and, energy stuff and whatever. Like it doesn't resonate the same way that it used to,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah. And so, kind of, I think it's just a spiritual evolution, and it's a continued evolution of finding the thing. And so, but for me, it's been like the recovery piece, though, it's not about moving on from recovery, because recovery doesn't resonate right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned the hard way that I've looked for a lot of different ways outside of, and so for me, I know that I need that center strand of my braid to be my recovery. I leave that, and then I've got, yoga is one of the strands, and then, different other modalities as the other strands, but I always continue to bring it back down
Mm-hmm.
into the recovery as that center strand.
And when you say recovery, you're talking about the program.
The program, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for me.
Okay. So you mentioned early on that, some of the realizations that you came to, and possibly some of the modalities that you've continued to experience wellness through, were into the mystical realm. Do you want to expand on that? And when did that start to become apparent in your life?
Mm. Well, in 2010, that first time I started going on my wellness journey and, a little bit of sobriety, I found yoga at a gym. And uh, it wasn't very long that I began to have like these kind of powerful experiences, because I didn't realize, because of my own childhood trauma, that I'd been dissociated from my body like my whole life. I was living intellectually in my head, and my body, my whatever, my energy body or whatever, was like way out here. And I was having these powerful experiences during yoga practices where it was like I was landing in my body for the first time, and I
Mm.
and understand what was happening. It would just be like I'd see the word truth, like boom, come through with my eyes closed. And and so that would be my mantra. It'd be like, there's something deep in me that is like resonating so hard with this word truth. And then I started a business that had that word in the title of it later. But and so it was stuff like that. I was having these powerful, like, kind of somatic experiences. So it started with that, and then I started to, as I went on my journey, and my light woke up, just the way that my friends did when she, came in, and she had this radiance coming off of her. And I felt this energy like coming out of my hands, like insanely powerful energy in my hands. And so there was no way I could deny that energy wasn't a factor in whatever the hell was going on with me. And I was coming from a very intellectual kind of, university type of, logic
Mhm.
where it's like, show me the things I can't see, you know?
I'm going to understand this at a molecular level.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Which I've got a better understanding of that now on that level. But at the same time, it was just like, I've got to explore what this is. So then I started going into different, like kind of spiritual uh, classes and stuff. And I learned about chakras and I learned about energy healing. And so I became a Reiki master and started actually learning that I can facilitate a person to go inside. And then we discover, you know, some sort of inner belief or blockage that, you know, needs to be moved out of the way. And so, you know, and then it started to go more and more of like, holy shit, I can channel, I can talk to spirit, I can, you know, I can visualize, I've got these little psychic abilities. I honestly think the more that a person heals, the more that these fine-tuned senses come open and available. Whereas I had just shut them down and shut them off and lived intellectually and like show me the science, I began to like less and less be able to deny that these things were a really part of my now inner working and my reality. I've got to learn how to cultivate and use these, right? So
Mhm.
I began to, you know, help other people learn how to use those things now, and that's a part of what I do.
What does your regiment look like today when the old thoughts come back? Now, I'm certain it's probably more than just running to the rooms for a meeting, right? So tell us about that. Like, how do you stay okay when things go sideways?
Yeah, balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I have to have a spiritual discipline, like a spiritual practice. And so I've learned the hard way over and over again that just kind of being undisciplined and floating through life and just, you know, for me, that's how I end up. Like, I think I'm going north, but now I'm going east. And so I have a spiritual discipline and a daily prayer practice that I do every single day without failure. And like, it doesn't matter where on the planet I am, I've got these prayer sheets and I've written them down and I'm working with my higher power. I've got my 12-step stuff incorporated into that. But lots of times, like I need a mind body movement practice, which yoga really works for me. I've recently started running again because it just moves so much energy. And that's what I feel that I need, at least right now. So I'm taking advantage of that and the good weather. Um, I talk to people that I trust. Like I've got to call that person who's just there to witness me and just to hear me. They're not fixing me. They're not really advising. If I've got a if I've got an idea, then I might run it past them and get their, you know, their perspective on it and, you know, yeah. So it's just these points of connection with myself, with the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I go and I lay down on the grass and that's the medicine I need, right? I'll go lay on the grass for 20 minutes,
Grounded.
half an hour. Yeah, get grounded, change that frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of it. And then, you know, a lot of the other pieces is service. It's about, you know, like check in on how somebody else is doing, you know, get out of my head, get out of my, you know, my stuff and see what's going on with somebody else. How can I, you know? And so a lot of it is the prayer and I used to have a pretty rigorous meditation practice. I do that less now. There's a little bit more of a like short 5-10 minute kind of thing that I do. But um, yeah, and so it's about showing up in the best way that I can in the world every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, good orderly direction, you know, and trying to be mindful and thoughtful about how I'm showing up in every one of these little decisions. I subscribe to the kind of my Indigenous heritage, which is, you know, there's a source of creation and so how do we learn to get in tune with that and to know that we're all actually interconnected and one. And it's one thing to be told that and to have heard that from a lot of different teachings and elders over the years. And it's another thing to embody that and to understand that. And I began to understand that in the subtleties of the empathic connection that I have sitting across from somebody in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how come when you feel embarrassed, I feel embarrassed?
Mm-hmm.
How come when you feel you know, happy and joy, I can cash in on your happiness and joy. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was those little subtle things that began to tune and tip me off to like that we are all interconnected in some way. And so living in a way that cultivates unity with one another, or oneness, which is what I believe that source of creation really wants for us, rather than separation, is what's key. And so these ways of life, the religions and even the recovery way of life, that's what it's for, in my view, is to help me cultivate unity with the other sources, the manifestations or expressions of creation, which are humans, animals, the earth, anything that is living and alive. And how do I unify with those things in harmony rather than in division and separation, which is what so much of the world is all about, right? And so when I am living in a way by these principles and these teachings and this way of life that cultivate us to be together in a good way, then I'm living the way that the source of creation wants. And that's when I feel like I'm at peace, or I'm at one with all of it, right? When I'm not, when I'm in my ego and I'm justifying why I hurt you, or why my lie to you was necessary, or why why these people are bad and they're wrong and we're right, and all of that crap, I'm down in the weeds and I'm missing the point, I think, honestly. And that's where a lot of the suffering is happening. And I've also spent a lot of years, including when I was young, separating myself by my inner dialogue, by my inner story. Some of it was inherited and absorbed from society, this is the human condition that we're dealing with right now. But that I'm different. Nobody wants me. I'm not good enough. These inner messages that were absorbed. And then I shut down and I put on, I'm not authentically who I am, so I can't connect with you. I can't really have that source of connection that I'm really longing for, which is really just an expression of unity and oneness. But I start to do it through artificial means, things that help me feel like I'm coming alive and I'm a part of this whole bigger picture or whatever, but it's artificial and it turns on you,
Are there any cultural teachings that really helped you, either early on or even into present day? Like when you turn to culture, what is it about that brings you wellness?
One thing that's just popping into my head right now is I was in a sweat lodge. I remember in there, the sweat leader said, he was sharing a teaching, and he said, so those of you who are in here and you're praying for strength and you're praying for, you don't pray for strength. All right. Here's what happens. And he said, he gave the story about how he kept praying for strength, praying for strength. And his elder had said, no, you don't pray for strength. Then you're going to get a whole bunch of strength testing situations come up. You don't do that, right? You're already so strong. You're already so, and he said to her, he's like, well, why the hell didn't you tell me that before? Because he's gone through all this time of difficulty, praying for strength, thinking he needs the strength. And I laughed because it was like, oh my God, I just came off of 6 weeks of praying for this strength, right? And it's been this hard, like white knuckling time of, just trying to make it through. And so I guess the thing that I've learned from that, and then, kind of verified a bit by my elder, has been, the deepest desires and things within us that we're asking for, a lot of times those prayers are being answered. It's just that they don't happen in the way that we think they're going to happen. In my mind, it's like Santa Claus, and I'm a good girl, so I'm rewarded with, it's nice and easy to transition. And I see this a lot with, people who ask for like that great next level relationship of reciprocation and all of that stuff. And so you ask for that, you really desire that. And then, okay, the prayer might be being answered, but it seems like the opposite happens. And then your relationship falls apart. And then, somebody else comes in and you're all wounded and damaged from them. And, it's all chaos. And And so I think honestly what happens is that source of creation is like, all right, your wish is my command a little bit, but it's removing all the things within me that are blocking me from being able to experience the highest and goodest relationship. So if I've got all kinds of, patterns of dysfunction and things that are blocking me from being able to actually have that relationship, that shit's all got to be removed and ripped out first. And so, people go through a lot of pain and not understanding why. And so they'll think like, I turn on this higher power, it screws me over, and this person died and all this and that. But it's actually like through that pain, in those, unforeseen circumstances sometime and all of that, that they actually, we're being built up. Like we're being, our character has the opportunity to grow. We have the opportunity to mature. We mature spiritually. We, this is where the healing really is. A lot of times it's in that hard, difficult, dark room, laying in the basement, kind of periods. And then when you come out on the other side of it, you're different and you're evolved more, and you see things from a different vantage point and a different perspective, and all of that. Right. And you've probably tuned into a different frequency because you let go of some big patterns back there that weren't serving you anymore. Like telling yourself you're not good enough. Like a lot of people are starting to say like, screw that. I'm not subscribing to those belief systems anymore, and so we're evolving and we're shifting and changing. And so really, I guess the teaching for me is that, the way that it happens, it's not like my childhood beliefs of, Santa Claus comes and delivers the gifts that I ask for because I've been a good girl this year, and so that's a part of a spiritual maturity, I think, that needs to happen. For myself, I see it happening with people all around us, but it's unfortunate that that's kind of the way this all goes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dawn, for joining me today. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. I think we covered a lot of ground, and I think we'll cap it there.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. Take care. Sorry, I forgot to ask Dawn where you can find her. If you want to learn more about what Dawn does, you can go to www.truth-inside.ca and see everything she's up to from there, including, including intuitive coaching, energy healing, transformative yoga, and events. So anyways, just thought I'd throw that in there, link in the comment section. Okay, if you got anything out of that, please hit that like button at the bottom of the screen, and we want to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment if something resonated with you, if you wish you could have learned more today, whatever it is, we want to know. We're all about fostering productive conversations about substance use, and we can't do it alone. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much, everybody. You can find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, or right here on YouTube. That's it. Thanks so much. Take care.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.